Whatever Shalva may be, his power is limited. So how could it be possible that he has conquered the strength of Balaramji and taken away my father, arresting him as described by this man? Alas, destiny is, after all, very powerful. While Sri Krishna was thinking like this, Shalva brought before him in custody a man exactly resembling Vasudeva, his father. These were all creations of the mystic power of Shalva. Shalva addressed Krishna. You rascal Krishna, look! This is your father, who has begotten you, and by whose mercy you are still living. Now just see how I kill your father. If you have any strength, try to save him. The mystic juggler Shalva, speaking in this way before Lord Krishna, immediately cut off the head of the false Vasudeva. Then, without hesitation, he took away the dead body and got into his airplane. Lord Krishna is the self-sufficient, supreme personality of Godhead, yet because he was playing the role of a human being, he became very depressed for a moment, as if he had actually lost his father. But at the next moment, he could understand that the arrest and killing of his father were demonstrations of the mystic powers which Shalva had learned from the demon Maya. Coming to his right consciousness, he could see that there was no messenger and no head of his father, but that Shalva had left in his airplane which was flying in the sky. He then began to think of slaying Shalva. Krishna's reaction is a controversial point among great authorities and saintly persons. How could Krishna, the supreme personality of Godhead, the reservoir of all power and knowledge, be bewildered in such a way? Lamentation, aggrievement, and bewilderment are characteristics of conditioned souls. But how can such things affect the person of the Supreme, who is full of knowledge, power, and all opulence? Actually, it is not at all possible that Lord Krishna was misled by the mystic jugglery of Shalva. He was displaying his pastime and playing the role of a human being. Great saintly persons and sages who are engaged in the devotional service of the lotus feet of Lord Krishna, and who have thus achieved the greatest perfection of self-realization, have transcended the bewilderments of the bodily concept of life. Lord Krishna is the ultimate goal of life for such saintly persons. How then could Krishna have been bewildered by the mystic jugglery of Shalva? The conclusion is that Lord Krishna's bewilderment was another opulence of his supreme personality. When Shalva thought that Krishna had been bewildered by his mystic representations, he became encouraged and began to attack the Lord with greater strength and energy by showering volleys of arrows upon him. But the enthusiasm of Shalva can be compared to the speedy march of moths. With a crashing blow from Krishna's club, Shalva's wonderful airplane burst into pieces and fell into the sea. Shalva was very careful, and instead of crashing with the airplane, he managed to jump onto the land. He again rushed toward Lord Krishna. When Shalva ran swiftly to attack Krishna with his club, Lord Krishna cut off his hand, which fell to the ground with the club. Finally deciding to kill him, the Lord took up his wonderful disc, which shone like the brilliant sun at the time of the dissolution of the material creation. When Lord Sri Krishna stood up with his disc to kill Shalva, he appeared just like a mountain with the red sun rising over it. Lord Krishna then cut off Shalva's head, and the head with its earrings and helmet fell to the ground. Shalva was thus killed in the same way that Vritrasura was killed by Indra, the king of heaven. When Shalva was killed, all his soldiers and followers cried, "Alas, alas!" While Shalva's men were thus crying, the demigods from the heavenly planets showered flowers on Krishna and announced the victory by beating drums and blowing bugles. At that very moment, other friends of Shishupal, such as Dantavakra, appeared on the scene to fight with Krishna and avenge the death of Shishupala and others. When Dantavakra appeared before Lord Krishna, he was extremely angry. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport of the 77th chapter of Krishna, the deliverance of Shalva.
Om Jnana Timidantasya Anjana Shalakaya Chakshun Militam Jina Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Sthapitam Jina Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Tadhati Shabadhantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Jatapada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavanscha Shri Rupam Sagrasatam Sagana Raganatan Vitam Stam Sadivam Sadvaitam Savatutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lolita Sri Vishakhan Vitamscha E Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Taptakam Shana Gourangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Prasapanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hori Priye Vanchakol Pitrupyascha Kripasindhu Pyevacha Ditanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. In the previous chapter, the son of Daruka had removed Pradyumna from the battlefield, acting as the charioteer. Daruka's son had done that. Why don't you take a chair, Maharaj? Or, yeah. Thank you very much. That's better. So now he's returning to the battlefield. He faces Duman, Shalva's commander-in-chief, and dispatches him. The battle is going on for nearly a month, 27 days. Krishna returns in haste from Hastinapur to Dwarka, and everyone becomes enlivened when Krishna arrives. Most of Shalva's soldiers had already been killed. Now Krishna appears and he directly attacks Shalva. He destroys his airplane and finally Shalva has to jump from the plane to save his life. Then this exhibition of a mystic trick goes on. Shalva creates a false messenger and a false Vasudeva and pretends to kill Vasudeva, Krishna's father. And Krishna momentarily is apparently bewildered. How is it that Shalva could have done this? Balaram was there. How could Shalva have gotten past Balaram? But then Krishna understood that this was a trick. No messenger, no Vasudeva. So now he's ready to kill Shalva. The Yeah, which he does. He beheads Shalva, and his followers and soldiers are crying, "Alas, alas!" Yeah. And then at the end, some friends of Shalva, such as Dantavakra, appear on the scene to avenge Shashupal's death and fight with Krishna. Are there any comments, questions? Yes. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Yes, and thank you very much for these daily readings. I'm very grateful for that. So I have a question from yesterday's points. Which,
if you hold the microphone close, then we'll all hear.
Which was the topic about, you spoke about suppressing is not something bad, and it's actually the same like controlling the senses, and psychology in the Western world, or like the modern psychology is bogus.
Well, I didn't go that far. Although I think Prabhupada, there's some quote to that effect, Prabhupada said, this psychology is all bogus. But I left that for Prabhupada, I didn't say that. But I certainly don't have much sympathy for the popular drugstore style psychology, where it all depends on you. It's just if you know the secret, if you've got the key for unleashing your unlimited potential, then you can achieve everything. And blah, 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 blah.
Yeah. So my question is, I wanted to hear your opinion about, nowadays when we do devotee care, it's kind of like a topic that's included, that devotees go to therapy, and because the nartas come up and the mind, there's like a lot of damages on the platform of the mind. So I wanted to ask you, what's your opinion if that's something which is...
Psychology is not per se bad. I think it's among the things that Krishna learned from Shandipani Muni. There's some psychology. And Prabhupada gave examples of psychology and, like a simple thing. The mother says, now see, this is an airplane and it's flying and it's flying and now it's flying right into your mouth. Rather than take your medicine and, stop complaining and take your medicine, or I'm going to, shove it down your throat. It's an airplane. So that's psychology. Or Prabhupada gave an example, instructing the daughter-in-law by instructing the daughter. You all know that example? Yes, no? Yes, everybody knows. So that's psychology. Similarly, in Bhagavatam, there are many examples of psychological understanding. For example, the Vidura is asking, let me get it straight. Vidura meets Uddhava, and there's some questions asked, but not about the disappearance of the questions are our relatives doing well? How about Vasudeva, and how about Balaram, and how about Krishna, and all of these things. Uddhava's asking Vidura, if I have it right. And he knew that Krishna had already disappeared. But just out of a kind of shock, he was asking. So that's an observation of psychology. And there are many others where the Bhagavatam or Shastra shows an interest, if you will, in psychology, or how people tick, as it were. And there's Krishna pacifies after the Kurukshetra war, he pacifies the afflicted relatives of the slain kings and princes. So that's psychology. In fact, it's mentioned the women are at the front of the procession. That's for psychological reasons also. They're most afflicted. So psychology is not banned. It's not banned. But so much of modern psychology is, first of all, most grievously based on values that we disagree with. I was going to say it's speculative, but so many things may be speculative. That's not the big problem. The big problem is that it's based on values that we thoroughly disagree with. Not always, but so often. Including stuff that devotees latch onto, or people in general latch onto. It's based on things like this idea that if you suppress your desires, then you'll be like the boiler that could explode at any moment, and therefore you have to, just follow your heart, and whatever comes out of your heart must be good, otherwise it wouldn't have been there in the first place. So you have to honor those feelings and those desires or urges that come from your heart. Otherwise, who knows what kind of psychological damage could take place. They're based on a glorification of sex. Your problem is just you're not having enough sex. No wonder you're such a mess. My God. So they have these, or this crazy idea of some God that you're always afraid of, as if he's like going to club you at any second. No wonder you've got this complex and that complex. With these crazy ideas. So many notions are there based on an atheistic worldview, based on the Kamopabhoga Parama, that the idea that sense gratification is the highest achievement in life, the highest goal in life, that it leads to, having lots and lots of sense gratification is going to lead to peace and satisfaction and all of that. And the Bhagavatam says that just the opposite. Atripyanti neha kripana bahudukha bhaja. That the desires are never satisfied. Duspurena nalinaja. The kanduyanena karayoriva dukkha dukkam. The more you itch, the more you scratch, the more it itches. So this is directly opposed to the assumptions of many schools or doctrines of modern psychology. That's the big problem. That it's antithetical to Krishna consciousness, or even decency, or moral principles, or even a true working of what's going to happen. They think that the more you gratify your senses, the more you'll be normal. And Bhagavad-Gita, the more you gratify the senses, the more you're going to be unhappy. Rajasastu pralam dukkam. The result of passion is misery. In fact, for those who who like little linguistic tidbits, the word passion originally comes from a word, which language is it now? That means suffering. Passion. Might as well get you your tidbit right. Middle English, from Old French, from Latin, from passus, suffered, from patior, I suffer, Proto-Indo-European. So the early meaning of passion is suffering. And so we have the passion of Jesus and so on, means suffering. So, a passion for excellence, a passion for Susie, a passion for whatever it is. The result of passion is suffering. But their ideas turn up the passion knob and your life will get better. The atheistic and Kierkegaard psychologists are also in the camp of those who think that, whatever whatever gender you want to be, if you think you're a girl, well, then you're a girl. If you think you're a boy, then you're a boy. You're born with a certain sex, but your gender is something else again. It's something you just choose. Somebody asked, if I think I'm a walrus, does that make me a walrus? Or a similar question. So they have all these notions which are harmful, which are based on falsity, which are harmful, which are contrary to spiritual wisdom and spiritual progress, and which lead to unhappiness. So it's hard to get on board with that sort of stuff. That's the problem. When I was briefly in college, the reigning god of psychology at the time was B.F. Skinner, in whose analysis. Do we have a path so the ladies can travel? In whose analysis the human being is basically not that much different from a rat. Everything's about stimulus and response, and so you sort of reduce human psychology to that level. Without knowledge of the spirit soul, without knowledge of any higher principle. That was the reigning paradigm, later replaced by Rogers and humanistic psychology, which felt a lot better. It wasn't this cold, mechanistic, awful, machine view robotic view of the human being. Then you became a whole person and you wanted to have it integrated. But they had some severely wrong ideas. They did some work and found that sort of allowing people to express their inner whatever and follow that led to psychological improvement. I think they were trying that in prisons or something, and they found, they got some empirically helpful results. And they thought, this is wonderful, let's try this in some more normal settings. They tried it in a convent. They got together with the sisters who were in charge, explained what their ideas were, what they wanted to do, and they worked it all out. And so they had their sessions with the sisters and explained the idea of just sort of, opening up and looking within your heart and seeing what what was there and what you really wanted out of life and so on, and giving space for that, honoring that and not repressing that. But soon the result was that Sister Mary realized that she was in love with Sister Margaret, And this one, it was a mess. It led to a disaster, and I don't remember whether that order of sisters ever recovered, but things went severely wrong. And later, I suppose there was some acknowledgement that maybe not everything in the heart is really good for us. So anyway, we go from this method to that method, this method to that method, and some of it is really bad stuff. Those are my objections. Really, again, it comes down to values and to a worldview. Otherwise, there may be things that are psychologically helpful. Not that we have to be blunt and crude and domineering and didactic. There is such a thing as there are psychological arts which can be helpful. But I'm not going to recommend anything here today. Suggest to you, who's good and who's not good. But in principle, we should avoid sort of cheap fix psychology, and particularly schools of psychology that run contrary to what we're trying to achieve in our life and to what we understand from the authority of Bhagavatam, Bhagavad-Gita, the Acharyas, and so on. Actually, so much is there, even if you never study psychology, so much is there in Bhagavatam. That's what constitutes that's therapeutically effective, starting with chanting Hare Krishna. Never underestimate the power of the holy name of Krishna. I can think of one devotee, Bhakta Peter, who joined our temple in Henry Street. And he was, a mess. He was barely functional, quite on the edge of catatonia. You'd ask him, Peter, would you like some prasadam? Oh, Krishna. I mean, pretty gone, And after chanting Hare Krishna and doing what we do, he became a brilliant devotee. He went on to become a Sanskrit scholar and an English and Sanskrit poet, published dozens and dozens of books that are still read and valued today. And without the intervention by trained professional psychologists, just really by the power of prasadam and the holy name and the association of devotees. In fact, if you look at our movement, especially in the early days, just about everyone was a nutcase. And, addicted to this, addicted to that, doing all sorts of harmful things to themselves and others, and really messed up. And they became brilliant people, self-controlled and purified, capable, so many things. Just by chanting Hare Krishna, reading Srimad Bhagavatam, associating with devotees, following regulative principles. So it should work the other way, perhaps, that psychology should the psychologists read Bhagavad-Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam and learn so much. In fact, it's my observation, I wouldn't put this forward as historically beyond argument, but it's my, what do they call, anecdotal observation that a lot of people who enter psychology programs in college do so because they're trying to figure out what's wrong with themselves. Yeah, I see a lot of people nodding their heads, yeah. What do you want to do with your life? I don't know, I'm going to study psychology, you know. I think. Why do you want to? Well, the real answer is I want to find out what's wrong with me. So, so in general, I encourage devotees to take the process of Krishna consciousness seriously. And that will do so much to make us happy and whole and so on. And to avoid psychology, at least that type of psychology which is contrary to spiritual values. That said, there is a place for psychology within Krishna consciousness. There are circumstances and instances where you'd say this person needs some kind of help beyond what the temple president might be able to give, because that's sort of another thing that, well, if you've been in the Hare Krishna movement for 3 years and you're the Sankirtan leader or a temple president or an ashram leader, then you must know how to deal with everybody's problems. And it's really not so. There are people who have very severe forms of psychological dysfunctionality and who really do need help from somebody who has training and experience in helping such people. People who may be suicidal, people who may be doing serious harm to themselves or others. It's not that we want to be blind to that and just pretend that, as the Sankirtan leader, I know what advice to give, and if you didn't take it, it's not my fault. So sometimes professional help is required, really. So I don't want to be handing out a dogma here that just says, no, psychologists are bad. Never. It's like doctors, so much of it, you just eat properly and live nicely and you won't need a doctor. But there are circumstances when, somebody's going to die if you don't take advantage of professional help. But not quacks. So does that clarify the matter? Okay. Yes.
I have
one more thing. And it's not that every devotee who sets himself up as a counselor, hangs up a shingle, devotee counselor is necessarily qualified. Sometimes quite the contrary. People want to set themselves up as counselors for whatever reason, and they're really not fit. And they, take advantage of their clients in the way that you might think that might first come to mind, and so on. So, and there are some very good, highly qualified professional devotee psychologists also. So. Okay. Yeah.
I have a very close relative who suffered from severe mental illness for 30 years. And I received a call from her one day and didn't realize at that time just how far down she had gone. But they were going to give her some sort of really intense electroshock therapy. And I told her, you should chant the Hare Krishna mantra. And I was explaining the Hare Krishna mantra to her, and she started chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. And then she got off the phone, and later she told me, at that moment, I said, I'm not going to do this anymore. She got up off the table, and she started getting better, and now she's a licensed psychologist.
Wow. We should put together a book of such testimonials. That's wonderful. Thank you. Srila Prabhupada gave a lecture which became a little booklet, Who is Crazy? Based on the Bhagavad-Gita verse, Sanushat Sarvabhutana. They think we're crazy and we think they're crazy. The Prabhupada also told the story of a murder case where the murderer pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. So the judge had a psychiatrist called in to examine the accused. And then the psychiatrist came and gave his report to the judge that, Your Honor, I've seen many, many clients, and in my opinion, everyone is crazy. So if you wish to excuse him, that's up to you. It's also just been, again, this is anecdotal, my observation after many, many years of being in the Krishna consciousness movement, I started realizing the extent to which ordinary people and even, highly placed or highly credentialed people are nuts. I mean, just nuts. Okay.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. In 1988, when I took some courses, I took one course titled Counseling.
Counseling.
During the breaks, I was told by the Maharaj, you can talk to whoever you want to help them, because you're chanting so nicely, you're doing this nicely, you're serving all the time, you're doing this, you're doing that. So I used to actually see a number of devotees all complaining this, that, everything. And I was just basically new, but all I did was chanting. So all I could say, please improve your chanting. How are you chanting? What are you doing? So wake up early a little bit and try and chant. And the following day or the day after, just immediately, more or less, there was an immediate effect. And I was seeing, positive results from everyone. Just simple.
You had the perfect medicine. These days, in earlier decades, psychologists and psychiatrists tended to be more involved in analysis and this. These days, everything's just knowing what chemical to prescribe. And, it's cheaper and easier, and whatever else we might say about it. But you reminded me that Prabhupada, when faced with so many devotees with their psychological he gave essentially the same advice: chant, worship the deities, take prasadam, just follow this process of Krishna consciousness. And he really had a lot of crazies, but that was his, he didn't tell me your problems, and what else, and how does that make you feel, and, and then what do you do? And does that work for you? Chant Hare Krishna. Your problem with confidence that would solve people's problems. I'm also reminded of an incident where one early follower of Srila Prabhupada asked Prabhupada for, I forget, $5 or something, And Prabhupada was the treasurer, so he would quiz people. So what do you want $5 for? I said, I want to buy some gasoline and kerosene or something and immolate myself, set myself on fire and commit suicide. And Prabhupada at once dismissed him as being crazy because that amount of money you could never buy enough kerosene.
Was that like a few cents?
Maybe I forget that's why I say I can't swear to $5, but he asked for a certain amount of money, and Prabhupada knew that this boy is nuts because you could never buy it for that amount.
Shall we shift to Shalva? Or may I shift to Shalva? I had a question about today's...
He was also crazy. All these demons, they're attacking Krishna. They're crazy. There's only one thing that could happen to them, but they're so crazy, they think that they could kill Krishna. I don't know whether it's obsessive compulsive disorder or what. Delusions of grandeur, or what it is in DSM-3 or DSM-4.
I saw there was a book full of witty sayings, and one of them was delusions of mediocrity. So I've never seen a magician show, but I do know that you're usually not allowed to examine the props, and I couldn't help but notice that he sure whisked off Vasudev pretty quickly after chopping off his head. I just thought that was kind of interesting, didn't leave any evidence to see, hey, that's not Vasudev. But in this morning's class, Sahadev Prabhu, he spoke. What's that?
No, it's too political. Go ahead.
Well, now I want to hear.
Well, I'm sorry.
In this morning's class, Sahadev Prabhu was speaking. His verses were about Shakatasur and Trinavarta. And he was saying that, these demons are trying to kill a baby. There's no extent that they won't go for sense gratification or whatever it is. And I was thinking about this Shalva, killing or pretending to kill Vasudeva, or Indrajit pretending to kill Sita, or just all of these. The demonic way of fighting is so low. But
Prabhupada, go ahead.
No. That's good enough.
Prabhupada said in a conversation, he's talking about super demonic people. He said, for their sense gratification, they will do anything. And then he repeated it, they will do anything. And if I get into it talking about that, it'll lead to political discussions and so on. So carry on. What were you saying?
Well, I guess. Hare Krishna. I'm happy with that. Just
You're happy. So yeah, just speak from Bhagavatam or Prabhupada and he becomes happy. Prabhupada said, chant Hare Krishna and be happy. I have a cousin who was a psychoanalyst. And, it was like clients were in psychoanalysis for years. And she said, on Christmas, they would call her up in anxiety because, that's a time when emotions come to the, after like 10 years of psychoanalysis, people are calling you up because they're still in, basically because it's not working. And chanting Hare Krishna. And it's, among other things, hey, it doesn't cost you anything. $80 an hour, $100 an hour. Chant Hare Krishna for free. Try that first at least, before you go off looking for expensive forums and graded seminars that start at this price and then go to that price. And then, want you to sign away your estate before you go there. Chant Hare Krishna for free.
I guess I did kind of have a slight follow-up on it. I was just thinking actually about Rakshashyati Vishvaso Goptritve and how the devotee is supposed to depend on Krishna to protect him in these different situations. But sometimes when we're not a very advanced devotee and the demons seem to have an edge because they are willing to do anything, we're put at a disadvantage. And I was kind of thinking of our dear Shamananda Prabhu's, Swami Jyoti Prabhu's son, when he was discussing dentistry and what he was doing in the office. It seemed like some of the other guys had a little edge in the office because they were willing to do things Shamananda Prabhu wouldn't. And I just felt, what is the hope for a pious person in the world, workforce, or wherever it is, when you're constantly put at a disadvantage?
Well, that's another thing, that I was thinking of that a little earlier, is that the whole atmosphere is toxic. Maybe not the whole atmosphere, but mostly. It's not surprising that people are so messed up, given the prevailing notions, the prevailing assumptions of society, the prevailing norms, what they call it a norm, when it's anything but normal. It's no wonder that people are in such distress, that people are confused. Their leaders are confused, their parents are confused, their teachers are confused, their political leaders are confused, their psychologists are confused. So it's not surprising that people are really in distress. Our Radhika Ramana Prabhu, who's a professor at American University, not at American University, told me that before COVID, the university was providing more for the professors greater training in suicide prevention because there was a growing level of student suicides. You're going to college and committing suicide. Although you come from a good family or you've been admitted to a good school, you have all these prospects ahead of you, and you want to kill yourself. Someone told me today that IIT students who was telling me that IIT students were committing suicide just because they were overstressed or whatever reason. So this is the world. It's and it starts with this thing. I think I'm this body. I'm not this body, but I falsely identify with this body, and then I'm in anxiety, I'm in stress, I'm in confusion, I'm in illusion. I don't know who I am. I'm thinking I'm something I'm not. I'm trying to be happy in a method that will never, even in theory, succeed. I'm looking toward a future in which I just, whether I'm a success or a failure, I'm going to be a failure because I'm going to die, and then it's all going to be over, and I'll be nothing. And it's just such a bleak and dark worldview. And we're looking at it from another point of view, just painting the large picture. There are three modes of nature: goodness, passion, and ignorance. When ignorance and passion prevail, how do you expect to have happiness? It's not possible. And that these are the prevailing modes in Kali Yuga. In ignorance, you get all these perversities, and you get drunkenness, you get what we now call substance abuse, you get every kind of dark mental and actual going on. In passion, you get just obsessive attachment, unlimited desires that can never be fulfilled, endeavor for something that will not succeed or that will lead to unhappiness. in goodness, there's satisfaction, there's peace of mind, there's contentment, there's wisdom. So our psychological approach is to come to the level of wisdom, come to the level of goodness, not to the level of passion and ignorance. There can be such a thing as spiritual psychology. There are approaches to human problems that do have spiritual assumptions at the bottom of them. So if you're going to go with something psychological, go that direction, not with something that assumes that if you just get enough sense gratification, everything will be all right. That's dumb. Yes. Hare Krishna, click, click. No?
Is it working?
Yes.
Okay. It's concerning Salva.
Shalva. Oh, yes, I remember Shalva. We were talking about him a long time ago.
Where I live, I distributed some books to my neighbors. And the one just below my floor was saying, looking at the pictures, he said, "Oh, Krishna, I heard about him. There's a channel on television called Alien Theory and a Gaia channel." And he said, "This Salva, we heard about him in one episode. He came with a flying saucer to attack Krishna." So it was somehow, like that story of Salva, it's like it's going in thousands of people's home who are watching this.
How about that? That's another. This is our Sadhaputta Prabhu found that there was an interested market among people who had an interest in unidentified flying objects. There are, even the United States military has recognized that there are objects that appear in the sky that we're not able to explain, and attested to by often by trained pilots who know what an aircraft is supposed to do. And, you can tick off a lot of stuff as, okay, well, that's nothing. And what you're left with is a residue of like, wow, these are like some pretty serious cases of something. So there are some, intelligent people, free thinking, you can say, people who think for themselves, who have an interest in UFOs. And Sadhaputta realized that, well, we have something to say about that, because we have this literature that's 5,000 years old that talks about various kinds of space vehicles and time travel and all sorts of associated phenomena. So basically, he wound up presenting ideas from Srimad Bhagavatam as being of scientific interest for those who had a interest in studying these unexplained phenomena in a scientific context. So everything's an opportunity. Yes?
I don't remember. Salva was coming from another planet?
Salva was coming from another planet?
I'm asking. I don't know.
It's not mentioned that he was coming from another planet. But close enough.
Srila Prabhupada also mentioned, when they were attacking from the sky, was like, did he not say anything about
There's
this?
so many examples in Bhagavatam of interplanetary travel, of Shalva is one, but the demigods are always showing up at various intervals, flying in their demigod craft. It's mentioned that the demons also can do all sorts of things of this nature. They read, what is it, Alien Identity? Sadhbuddha Prabhu has written a book on these things. So you can find a lot about space vehicles in Srimad Bhagavatam and the Puranas.
It was interesting because through those channels, they even accepted that Krishna can have many arms. They came out with like, the more you go high in the planetary system, everything expands. So why not having many arms and all? He was almost preaching to me.
One thing that, again, this is anecdotal evidence, but we've been distributing Srila Prabhupada's books for like 50 years now, and it's percolating into all sorts of places. We've seen people send you stuff from Facebook or whatever. So there was a Mercedes-Benz ad with a very sophisticated woman in a brand new Mercedes-Benz reading Science of Self-Realization. The book is prominently visible. There's other stuff where that they must have read Srila Prabhupada's books. In other words, where did they get these ideas? They're just like following right on. And it's not surprising. We've been distributing these books. People are reading them. So they pick up an idea here, an idea there, or they pick up a whole batch of stuff. It's hard to measure scientifically, what impact Krishna consciousness has had. But it certainly has influenced a larger audience than one might suspect. Prabhupada gave the example of the communists who spread their bad philosophy very powerfully. So that, we think now communists, everybody knows the communists are jerks, but back in the 1940s, serious American intellectuals thought that Marx was really onto something, that communism was the answer to inequality and so many social evils. My mother told about a family who lived on our block or something, and they were, strongly left-leaning and really enamored of Marxism, and sort of, they were preachers of the gospel of Marx. And then they went to Russia and saw what it was. And then they came back, with their heads down. But anyway, the point was that this illegitimate, ultimately, philosophy spread very powerfully, both in popular imagination and among educated intellectuals even, just because they distributed their literature so vigorously. They distributed their literature so vigorously that it had an effect. So what will happen when we distribute our literature vigorously, and when it offers real wisdom, real substance, it will have an effect. It is having an effect. So keep passing out those books. Yes.
Hare Krishna. I'm not too sure how to word this question, but I can't remember where I heard the phrase that pride and depression are two sides of the same coin. I don't know how to understand what this means. I thought maybe you might be able to clarify. I didn't know also whether, like, if one has pride to that same degree, they have depression, or if one is depressed, they have that same amount of pride, or if they're just not even related at all.
I don't have any really anything to say about it. I don't know where it came from. I don't know what context it fits in. Pride and depression. But they belong to passion and ignorance. Pride is, I can't say on scriptural authority that it goeth before destruction and a haughty spirit before a fall. That much I know. Depression, what happens? I'm proud, I'm enthusiastic, I'm going to enjoy, and then from that comes frustration. What is that? Kamat krodho vijayate krodhad bhavati sammohat smriti vibrama smriti brahmshad buddhi nasho pranashati. That comes that from what is the Jayadvaita Vijaya Pumsa? That this is the modern world. Think of sense gratification. We'll dangle something for you on the internet or on television or on the radio or here or there. Something to catch your mind. And highly paid psychologists. I mean, what pays? Therapy for screwed up teenagers, that's okay. But motivational psychology, now there's a career. That's where the big money is. Go work for Google, go work for Apple, go work for the big guys and make big bucks, because they're making big bucks by figuring out what it is that's going to sell, 42 million of whatever it might be. Motivational psychology. But so there's people being paid big money to keep you, to agitate your mind, basically, to get your mind meditating on whatever brand of sense gratification suits their marketing objectives. And then you become attached, sangha, and then desire develops. Lust, I gotta have it, her, that, this. And then when you're frustrated, then anger. And even that you can market, so you see these models, it's like, right? Yeah, don't mess with me because, I did 14 years in San Quentin and you say anything about my Gucci shoes, I'll beat the living daylights out of you. So they're essentially, how can we make money off of Crowd? Because unsatisfied lust leads to anger. And that, Krota Bhavati Sammo, then bewilderment, loss of memory, and I don't know what I'm doing. I lose my intelligence, and then I'm finished. So depression fits in there somewhere. Anger, depression.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
I was wondering if you could give any advice or tips how to best help friends or colleagues who are very shut off to, I could never start, if I started trying to talk about Krishna, I think it just wouldn't sink in. They maybe are more agnostic and believe in some higher power, but if I were to say things more directly, I don't think that would help them. And they're very skeptical about things. If I were to say, we're not this body, a soul, how do you know? They might ask. So how to best go about, helping or approaching people?
I don't have a one-size-fits-all solution or even a set of tips. You have to see according to the individual circumstance. Maybe you don't bother with them. You go on to people who are interested. Among your colleagues, 2 are just like hard-boiled, don't want to hear it types, and 1 or 2 are more open. Spend your time with those who are more willing to hear from you. That's one thought. But otherwise, you look for, you're always thinking how to benefit them, how to benefit them, how to benefit. And Krishna will give you the intelligence how to benefit them. Give them a copy of my book.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. I was telling a friend how Krishna consciousness and all, he is Christian and he doesn't fully believe in Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh and all. So how do I make him believe in, demigods first to start with?
How do you get your friends to believe in demigods?
First, because they basically don't know anything about Hindu. So how do I introduce him to this?
Why do you have to start with demigods?
Because I don't know, I think they wouldn't understand the whole thing of
you're very demonstrative with the microphone, but it needs to be.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so how do I explain them? Because Supreme Personality of God, I can start with that, they need to have a base to build on.
First thing, start with you're not this body. Okay. Before we come to demigods and then Lord Shiva and so on and so on. Am I this body or am I something else? Am I matter? Or is there more to life than matter? That's second chapter of Bhagavad-Gita. That's the beginning of Krishna's instructions. So you may choose to start at the beginning rather than, further on. But if challenged about them, it's our experience in the world that things are managed in a hierarchy. You may not see the head of Apple Corporation. You just see your iPod or iPhone or whatever. But there's some intelligence behind the corporation. And there's networks of people. They all know one another. The head of Microsoft, the head of Google, the head of Apple, and they're powerful. If they get together and sit in a room and make some decision, your whole life can change. So that means they're Ishvaras, controllers. I control my dog. Someone else controls family. Someone else controls a school or a business. And then there's some people who have really vast controls. They control governments or they control multinational corporations. They have immense power. So what is the difficulty? You can say that they're demigods. They have godlike powers. They're not supreme, they're not immortal, but they, compared to you and me, they have almost unimaginable power. In fact, it is unimaginable, or beyond what most people would expect. There's some people who have such powers that when they want to do things, governments fall and armies go to war and all sorts of things happen. Because the amount of money they have, the amount of connection, the extent of their connections, their expertise, their favor banks with very, very important people, and they want to do something. What happened? So what is the difficulty in believing that there are still more powerful people or still more powerful beings? Bill Gates doesn't control the seasons. Yeah, sure.
Hare Krishna, Maharaj. Forgive me, this is a simple question. But is it true that Srila Prabhupada said that in 10,000, he mentioned something about 10,000 years that the Krishna consciousness will no longer exist?
We've heard that.
Okay, and also, I just want confirmation on whether he also said that 10% of the world's population will become devotees.
I'd never heard that.
Thank you.
But what we hear is that there's supposed to be a time during Kali Yuga when Krishna consciousness will flourish. I've heard 10,000 years. And then there's a time when it drops out of sight. We read in Srimad Bhagavatam that people become like animals. And they're at the end of the age, they're so degraded that even an avatar can't instruct them anything. So Krishna comes in as Kalki and just kills them wholesale. And that's how they attain liberation. So there's at that time, no Krishna consciousness. There's barely even what we call human consciousness. So that time will come. And someone asked Srila Prabhupada, what will your disciples be doing then? Prabhupada, my disciples will be with Krishna.
Thank you.
Haribol Maharaj. These two devotees were talking about maybe introducing Krishna to their friends or co-workers, family, etc. And I was just reflecting on how my husband, Doug, as he was becoming a devotee, he never really talked about it to other people, but they saw the change in him. And then they came to him with questions. So also I feel like when we're doing something right and we're being good devotees, then we're going to be happy and people will want to know what we're doing.
Yeah. Just by your example. Very good.
Hare Krishna. A few chapters back, we read that.
Excuse me, just to amplify that, sometimes we lose sight of how different the platform is of devotional service from the platform of materialistic life. Materialists are in anxiety. Their faces are dark. You can read their faces. They're miserable. And then you see these devotees. They're happy. They're peaceful. They have this. What would you say? They're in the mode of goodness. They're effulgent. So people like really different. And they're not. This is not like they're preaching, but they're going up to check in for an airline, for an air flight, and people pick up on it. Like they say something by which they acknowledge that you're different, even if you're dressed like a ordinary person. They think. Yes. Where were we? Last, because we're...
Couple of chapters back, we read that this Kurukshetra was planned by Krishna to decrease the burden of the earth. And I was wondering, can we say the same about the pandemics and wars happening?
About the?
Pandemics and wars happening today.
Pandemics and wars. Yes, essentially the pandemics and wars are arrangements by which the material energy reduces the burden. Reduces the burden. I could say a lot about wars and pandemics. It gets a little complicated. Certainly, it involves sort of mass karma. A lot of people getting their comeuppance at once. It involves, there's just so much involved. There's so much that could be said about how war is instigated, for what purposes wars are fought. The suffering that wars and pandemics bring, the motives for, once I get started, there'll be a lot. 6 16th chapter of Bhagavad-Gita is very instructive in this regard, the divine and demonic natures, wars and pandemics. Let's just say in summary that they represent the results of karma and the further involvement in creating new karma. We're starting a war or finishing a war, and it will have its, we think we won, but what did we win? We have to get the reactions for whatever sinful activities we've performed in the course of the war, or in the course of profiting from a pandemic, or whatever it is. So karma gets complex. I've written about that in my book. I'm not going to quote today, but the ins and outs of karma are so complex that no one can trace it all. But this is the material world. Sometimes we enjoy, sometimes we suffer, sometimes we become demigods, sometimes we become bugs. Going around and around in lifetime after lifetime by the actions and reactions of karma. But all of this can be stopped. Karmani nirdhati kintu cha bhakti bhaja govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajan. Just by devotional service, the karma can be burned down to the root. If you chop down a plant or a tree, it can grow up again. But if you burn out the roots, it's all over. So if one takes up devotional service, then pure devotional service can, tapatrayonamulam, completely uproot all the problems of material existence. Okay. And now, if you agree, we're going to chant Hare Krishna. And I wonder who would like to lead us today. Maharaj, would you like to lead Kirtan? Karmani nirdhati kintu cha bhakti bhaja govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajami.
Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Shadi Gaura Bhakta-vrinda.
Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Shadi Gaura Bhakta-vrinda.
Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Shadi Gaura Bhakta-vrinda.
Shri Krishna Chaitanya
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama,
Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki, Ananta Koti Vaishnav Vrinda ki.
Well, I think everyone's already been coming day after day, so you know that the books are here. They're $15.95 in America, and here they're whatever you might like to give. And on the other side, there's Mahaprasadam being given out by Radhesha Prabhu, and we're in the same venue at the same time tomorrow evening, continuing with Krishna book and what have you. Thank you all very much. Hare Krishna. Krishna Katha. That's what we have.